Chapter 1. The Whisper in the Fog. Hercule Poirot adjusted his overcoat against the chill of the English autumn, his polished shoes clicking softly on the platform of the rural train station. The air was thick with fog, a grey veil that muffled the world and lent an air of mystery to the evening. He had received a letter 2 days prior, penned in the elegant but urgent hand of Lord Reginald Ashbourne, an old acquaintance from a case long past. The letter had been brief, almost curt, requesting Poirot's presence at Ashbourne Manor to investigate the theft of a priceless artifact. The Shadowed Scepter, the words danger and discretion, had been underlined twice, piquing Poirot's curiosity. He did not often venture into the countryside, preferring the orderly bustle of London, but a mystery such as this could not be ignored. As the train's whistle faded into the mist, a tall figure emerged from the gloom, a driver, clad in a dark livery, holding a sign with Poirot's name. "Monsieur Poirot? I'm Thomas, sent by Lord Ashbourne," the man said, his voice low, as if wary of being overheard. Poirot nodded, noting the driver's nervous glance over his shoulder. The journey to the manor was silent, the car winding through narrow lanes where skeletal trees loomed like spectres in the fog. Poirot's mind, ever active, began to catalogue the details, the driver's unease, the isolation of the route, the cryptic nature of the summons. Ashbourne Manor came into view abruptly, its Gothic silhouette piercing the fog like a monument to forgotten grandeur. Ivy clung to its stone walls, and tall windows glowed faintly, as if reluctant to reveal the secrets within. The car crunched to a halt on the gravel drive, and Thomas hurried to open the door. "His lordship is expecting you," he muttered, avoiding Poirot's gaze. Poirot smoothed his moustache, his grey cells already humming with anticipation. A mystery awaited, and he, Hercule Poirot, would unravel it. Inside, the manor's grandeur was undeniable but tinged with decay. The entrance hall boasted a chandelier that flickered weakly, casting shadows across a marble floor worn by time. Portraits of stern-faced Ashbournes lined the walls, their eyes seeming to follow Poirot as he was led to the drawing-room. Lord Reginald Ashbourne stood by a roaring fire, his gaunt frame stooped, but his presence commanding. "Poirot, thank heavens you've come," he said, his voice a mix of relief and strain. His handshake was firm but brief, and his eyes darted to the door as if expecting an intruder. "Mon ami, your letter was most intriguing," Poirot said, settling into a leather armchair. "Tell me of this Shadowed Scepter and the trouble it has brought." Lord Ashbourne hesitated, then began. The scepter, a relic of ancient craftsmanship, had been in the family for centuries, housed in a secure vault beneath the manor. Its value was not merely monetary, but tied to a legend of power and misfortune. A week ago it had vanished, and with it came strange occurrences, whispers in the night, lights flickering without cause, and a growing unease among the household. Poirot listened intently, his eyes sharp as he observed Lord Ashbourne's family who had gathered in the room. There was Lady Eleanor, Reginald's poised but cold wife, her fingers twisting a pearl necklace, their son Charles, a restless young man with a gambler's charm, paced by the window. His sister Beatrice sat quietly, her pale face betraying a nervous intensity. The butler, Mr. Grayson, hovered at the edges, his demeanour impeccable yet strained. And then there was Miss Clara Duval, a French governess employed for Beatrice's young cousin, whose dark eyes met Poirot's with a flicker of defiance. Each, Poirot noted, wore a mask of sorts, hiding something beneath their polished exteriors. "You suspect someone within the household?" Poirot asked, his tone mild but probing. Lord Ashbourne's jaw tightened. "I cannot say, Poirot, but the vault was locked, the key secure. Only a few knew of its existence." He lowered his voice. "And last night I heard whispers, Poirot. Not human, but something else." The room fell silent, the crackle of the fire, the only sound. Lady Eleanor laughed sharply, dismissing the claim as nerves, but Poirot saw fear in her eyes. He began his inquiries, moving with the precision of a chess master. Charles admitted to debts but swore he'd never touched the scepter. Beatrice spoke of strange dreams, her voice trembling. Miss Duval claimed ignorance, though her accent faltered under Poirot's scrutiny. Mr. Grayson, the butler, recounted checking the vault the night of the theft and finding nothing amiss. Yet Poirot's keen senses detected inconsistencies. A pause too long, a glance too quick. As the evening deepened, the fog pressed closer against the manor's windows, and the atmosphere grew heavier. Poirot excused himself to examine the vault, guided by Grayson. The descent to the basement was cold, the air damp with age. The vault door, heavy and iron-bound, showed no signs of tampering, yet Poirot's fingers traced a faint scratch near the lock. "Curieux," he murmured, his mind racing. The scepter's absence was not merely a theft but a puzzle, one that suggested careful planning and perhaps an inside hand. Returning to the drawing-room, Poirot found the family in a state of agitation. A maid had reported hearing whispers again, this time from the east wing, a part of the manor rarely used. Charles scoffed, but Beatrice's hands trembled. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Monsieur, madame," he said, addressing the room. "The truth, it hides in the shadows, but Hercule Poirot will bring it to the light. Tomorrow we begin in earnest." As the household retired, Poirot stood by the fire, his mind a whirl of details. The fog, the whispers, the scratch on the vault. The Shadowed Scepter was more than a relic. It was a catalyst, drawing out the secrets of Ashbourne Manor. He smiled faintly, his moustache twitching. The game was afoot, and Poirot was in his element. Chapter 2. The Scepter Sex Curse. Hercule Poirot awoke to the muted light of a foggy morning, the world outside Ashbourne Manor cloaked in a grey haze that seemed to seep into the very walls. He dressed meticulously, his mind already sifting through the impressions of the previous evening, the nervous glances, the whispered fears, the scratch on the vault's lock. The Shadowed Scepter, he mused, was not merely stolen but had ignited a peculiar unease in the household. Today he would uncover the roots of this mystery, beginning with the scepter's storied past. Breakfast was served in the manor's dining room, a cavernous space with tall windows that did little to brighten the gloom. The Ashworth family sat in strained silence, their plates barely touched. Lord Reginald, at the head of the table, looked haggard, his eyes shadowed by sleeplessness. Lady Eleanor maintained her icy composure, though her fork trembled slightly as she lifted it. Charles slouched in his chair, muttered about the fog delaying a planned hunt, while Beatrice stared at her tea, her face pale as porcelain. Miss Clara Duval, the governess, was absent, attending to her young charge, but her empty seat seemed to loom large. Poirot, sipping his coffee, observed them all, his grey cells alert to every nuance. "Lord Ashbourne," Poirot began, his voice cutting through the silence, "you spoke last night of the Shadowed Scepter's legend. I must know more. Its history, it may hold the key to its disappearance." The room stilled, forks pausing mid-air. Lord Reginald cleared his throat, his gaze flickering to his family before settling on Poirot. "The scepter," he said, "has been in our family for over 3 centuries, passed down from a distant ancestor, Sir Edmund Ashbourne. It is no mere trinket, a rod of blackened silver topped with a gem said to glow faintly in darkness. Legend claims it was forged by a secret order, one that believed it held power over fate itself." He paused, his voice dropping. "But it comes with a curse. Every generation that possesses it faces calamity, fires, bankruptcies, untimely deaths." Lady Eleanor snorted softly. "Superstition, Reginald. It's a valuable artifact, nothing more. Its theft is a matter of greed, not curses." Her tone was sharp, but Poirot noted the way her fingers tightened around her napkin. Charles rolled his eyes, while Beatrice's gaze darted nervously to her father. "Perhaps, madame," Poirot said smoothly, "but the mind, it clings to such stories when valuables vanish. Tell me, Lord Ashbourne, who knew of the scepter's existence?" Reginald listed the family, the butler, Mr. Grayson, and the late curator, Mr. Hargrove, who had died a year prior. "No one else," he insisted, though Poirot's keen senses detected a hesitation. After breakfast, Poirot requested a tour of the manor's gallery, where relics and portraits hinted at the scepter's past. Lord Reginald led him through echoing halls, the air heavy with the scent of old wood and wax. The gallery was a long, dim room, its walls lined with paintings of Ashmoor's past, their stern faces mirroring the living family's tension. At the far end hung a portrait of Sir Edmund, clutching a dark, ornate rod, the Shadowed Scepter. Poirot studied the painting, noting the gem's depiction, a deep crimson that seemed to pulse even in oils. "Magnifique," Poirot murmured, his eyes tracing the scepter's intricate design. "And the curse has it struck recently." Reginald recounted a string of misfortunes, a fire in the stables 2 years ago, Charles's gambling debts, and the sudden death of Hargrove. "Since the scepter's theft," he added, "the manor feels haunted, whispers at night, lights flickering. Even the servants are frightened." Poirot's moustache twitched. "The mind, it plays tricks when fear takes hold, but Hercule Poirot seeks facts." He turned to the family, who had followed at a distance. "I will speak with each of you today. The truth, it hides in the details." His first interview was with Charles, whose cavalier attitude belied a nervous energy. In the study, Charles admitted to debts, but denied touching the scepter. "I'd sell my own horse before I'd steal from father," he said, though his eyes avoided Poirot's. Next, Beatrice spoke in hushed tones, confessing she'd heard whispers near her room, describing them as like voices from a dream. Her sincerity struck Poirot, though her vagueness suggested fear rather than deception. Lady Eleanor was less forthcoming, her responses clipped. "I have no time for ghost stories, Monsieur Poirot. The scepter was stolen by someone opportunistic, perhaps a servant." Yet her disdain faltered when Poirot pressed about her late-night walks in the manor, observed by a maid. She dismissed it as insomnia, but her composure cracked. Miss Duval, interviewed in the nursery, was an enigma. Her French accent was flawless, yet Poirot detected a trace of something else, perhaps Eastern European in her inflection. She claimed ignorance of the scepter, her role limited to teaching young Emily, but her sharp gaze suggested otherwise. "The manor is full of secrets," she said cryptically, "but I keep to my duties." Mr. Grayson, the butler, was last. His account of checking the vault was meticulous, yet Poirot noted a bead of sweat on his brow. "The lock was intact, sir," Grayson said. "I saw nothing amiss." Poirot smiled thinly, filing away the butler's precision for later scrutiny. As evening fell, the fog thickened, wrapping the manor in an oppressive shroud. Poirot retired to his room, a small but elegant chamber overlooking the gardens. He sat at a desk, sketching a mental map of the family's motives: Charles's debts, Beatrice's fear, Eleanor's secrecy, Duval's evasiveness, Grayson's unease. The scepter's curse, whether real or imagined, had stirred something dark in Ashbourne Manor. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. A maid, trembling, reported another whisper, this time from the east wing where no one ventured. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Merci, mademoiselle. Tomorrow we explore this wing." The shadows, they speak, and Poirot listens. He stood at the window, the fog a mirror to his thoughts. The Shadowed Scepter was more than a stolen relic. It was a key to a deeper truth, one woven into the manor's very stones. As the clock struck midnight, a faint whisper seemed to echo through the walls, not a voice, but a challenge. Poirot's lips curved. The game was only beginning. Chapter 3. Footprints in the Dust. The morning air in Ashbourne Manor was heavy with the scent of damp stone and unease, the fog outside lingering like an uninvited guest. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed despite the early hour, stood in the basement corridor before the vault, his sharp eyes fixed on the faint scratch he had noticed the previous night. The Shadowed Scepter's theft was no crude burglary, he was certain, but a calculated act. His grey cells hummed as he resolved to explore the manor's neglected corners, seeking clues the thief might have overlooked. The whispers reported by the maid, emanating from the east wing, tugged at his curiosity like a loose thread in a tapestry. After a brief breakfast where the Ashbourne family's strained silence spoke louder than words, Poirot requested a map of the manor from Mr. Grayson, the butler. The map, yellowed and creased, revealed the east wing as a labyrinth of disused rooms, sealed off since the family's fortunes dwindled decades ago. "Few venture there, sir," Grayson said, his voice tight. "It's dusty, unsafe." Poirot's moustache twitched. The dust, it preserves secrets. Monsieur Grayson, I shall see for myself. Armed with a lantern, and accompanied by Captain Hastings, who had arrived that morning to assist, Poirot made his way to the East Wing. Hastings, ever enthusiastic, chatted about the scepter's legend, but Poirot's focus was elsewhere, his eyes scanning the floor. The corridor leading from the vault stretched toward the East Wing, and there, in the faint light, he spotted them, footprints in the dust, barely discernible but unmistakable. They were small, deliberate, and led away from the vault. "Mon ami," Poirot said, crouching. "Observe. These are not the heavy boots of a servant, nor the shoes of a gentleman. They are precise." The footprints guided them through a maze of corridors, the air growing colder and the walls more decrepit. Cobwebs draped like lace, and the floorboards creaked underfoot. Hastings shivered, muttering about ghosts, but Poirot's focus was unwavering. The trail ended at a heavy oak door, its handle rusted but intact. Beside it, on the floor, lay a torn fragment of paper, its edge jagged. Poirot lifted it carefully, revealing a few scrawled words. "Shadow, Keeper, Midnight." His eyes narrowed. "Curieux. This is no accident." As he examined the door, a faint etching caught his attention, a symbol, a circle bisected by a crooked line, carved into the wood. It was crude, almost hidden, but deliberate. "Hastings, this mark, it is not decorative. It speaks of intent, perhaps a signal." Before he could investigate further, a piercing scream echoed through the manor, sharp and urgent. Hastings started, nearly dropping the lantern. "Good heavens, Poirot! What was that?" They hurried back toward the main house, the scream's origin leading them to the servants' quarters. There, in a narrow hallway, they found a young maid, Nellie, slumped against the wall, clutching her arm. Blood seeped through her sleeve, and her eyes were wide with terror. It was in the dark, she stammered. "Something grabbed me." Poirot knelt beside her, his calm demeanor a contrast to the chaos. "Mademoiselle, breathe. Tell Poirot what you saw." Nellie's story was disjointed but vivid. She had been sent to fetch linens from a storage room when a shadow moved in the darkness, followed by a sharp pain in her arm. She saw no face, only a fleeting figure vanishing into the gloom. Poirot examined her wound, a shallow cut, clean but deliberate, as if made by a small blade. This was no accident, he murmured, his mind racing. The attack felt like a warning, but to whom? While Hastings fetched the housekeeper to tend to Nellie, Poirot returned to the East Wing, determined to unlock the oak door. The lock was old but sturdy, resisting his attempts to pick it with a hairpin, a trick he rarely admitted to using. Frustrated, he scanned the surrounding walls, noticing a loose panel. With a gentle push, it gave way, revealing a narrow crawl space. Inside, a single object glinted in the lantern's light, a silver button embossed with a crest not unlike the Ashworth family's. "Mon Dieu," Poirot whispered. "The plot, it thickens." Back in the drawing-room, Poirot gathered the family to report Nellie's attack, watching their reactions closely. Lord Reginald paled, muttering about the curse. Lady Eleanor dismissed it as a servant's clumsiness, though her eyes flickered with unease. Charles, unusually subdued, claimed ignorance, while Beatrice clutched her hands, whispering, "It's the scepter's doing." Miss Duval, summoned from the nursery, offered sympathy but little else, her gaze lingering on Poirot as if gauging his progress. "The East Wing," Poirot announced. "It holds answers. Who among you has ventured there recently?" Silence greeted him, broken only by Charles' scoff. "That place is a ruin, Poirot. No one goes there." Yet the silver button now tucked in Poirot's pocket suggested otherwise. He pressed further, asking about the symbol he'd seen, but no one admitted recognition. The family's denials were too uniform, too practiced. As the day waned, Poirot retreated to his room to reflect. The footprints, the torn note, the symbol, the button, Nellie's attack, all were pieces of a puzzle, each pointing to a careful conspiracy. The scepter's theft was not the end, but the beginning, a spark igniting hidden tensions. He sketched the symbol on a notepad, its crooked line nagging at his memory. had he seen it before, in a case long past. Dinner was a tense affair, the family's forced politeness, a thin veneer over their unease. Poirot declined to join them, instead slipping back to the east wing under cover of dusk. The fog outside pressed against the windows, amplifying the manor's isolation. As he stood before the oak door, a faint sound reached him, a whisper, not unlike those reported, but clearer now. It was a single word. Keeper. Poirot's pulse quickened. The Shadowed Scepter was no mere relic. It was a beacon, drawing out the manor's darkest secrets. He returned to his room, the whisper echoing in his mind. Tomorrow he would force the door open, confront the shadows, and unravel the truth. For now he sat by the fire, the silver button in his hand, its crest a silent accusation. The game, as always, was afoot, and Hercule Poirot would not rest until every secret was laid bare. Chapter 4. The Midnight Masquerade. The fog clung to Ashbourne Manor like a shroud, but within its walls the grand ballroom sparkled with forced festivity. Lord Reginald, determined to maintain appearances despite the theft of the Shadowed Scepter, had insisted on hosting the annual masquerade ball, a tradition drawing local gentry and distant relations. Hercule Poirot, standing at the edge of the room, adjusted his simple black mask, his sharp eyes scanning the swirl of silks and feathered disguises. The air was thick with perfume and tension, the music a lively waltz that did little to mask the undercurrent of unease. To Poirot the ball was not a distraction but a stage, where secrets might slip from behind the masks. The ballroom was a vision of faded opulence, crystal chandeliers cast flickering light across gilded walls, and a polished floor reflected the dancers' movements. Lord Reginald, masked as a medieval knight, mingled stiffly, his forced smiles betraying his preoccupation. Lady Eleanor, resplendent in a silver gown and peacock-feathered mask, glided among guests, her poise a shield against scrutiny. Charles, dressed as a roguish highwayman, laughed too loudly at a group of young women, while Beatrice, in a pale blue gown and delicate lace mask, hovered near the shadows, her eyes darting nervously. Miss Clara Duval, the governess, wore a crimson mask that matched her enigmatic air, her presence at the ball unexpected but intriguing. Mr. Grayson, the butler, moved silently, overseeing servants with an almost mechanical precision. Poirot, ever the observer, noted the dynamics alliances formed in whispered asides, glances exchanged across the room. The scepter's theft hung over the manor like a spectre, and he sensed the guests knew more than they let on. His grey cells buzzed, recalling the footprints, the torn note, the carved symbol, and the silver button from the east wing. Tonight, he resolved to watch for any sign of the Shadow's keeper mentioned in the fragment. As the clock neared midnight, Poirot's attention was drawn to a figure in a hooded cloak, their mask a blank white oval that obscured all expression. They moved with purpose, slipping through the crowd toward a side door leading to the gardens. Poirot followed, his steps silent on the polished floor. The fog outside was impenetrable, swallowing the figure as they vanished into the night. He paused at the threshold, ears straining, and caught a faint murmur, a conversation too low to discern but urgent in tone. The keeper, midnight, safe, were the only words he caught before the voices faded. Returning to the ballroom, Poirot's suspicions deepened. The cloaked figure's departure suggested a rendezvous, perhaps tied to the scepter. He approached Beatrice, whose nervous demeanor made her a likely source of unguarded information. "Mademoiselle," he said softly, "you seem troubled. Have you seen a cloaked figure tonight?" Beatrice's eyes widened behind her mask, and she stammered, I don't know. Everyone's in costume." Her hands twisted together, betraying her anxiety. Poirot pressed gently, but she excused herself, fleeing to her mother's side. The music swelled, and the dancers spun faster, but Poirot's focus shifted to a sudden commotion near the refreshment table. Lady Eleanor, her face pale beneath her mask, clutched her throat, her pearl necklace gone. "It was there a moment ago," she cried, drawing a crowd. The guests murmured, some glancing suspiciously at the servants. Poirot's eyes narrowed. A second theft, so soon after the scepter, was no coincidence. He examined the scene, noting a spilled glass of wine and a single feather from a mask on the floor, crimson like Miss Duval's. He sought out the governess, finding her near the orchestra, her expression serene but her eyes sharp. "Mademoiselle Duval," he said, "a necklace has vanished. You were nearby, non?" Her lips curved slightly. "I was admiring the music, Monsieur Poirot. I saw nothing." Her voice was steady, but Poirot detected a flicker of amusement. He filed it away, suspecting she knew more than she admitted. Lord Reginald, informed of the theft, called for a discreet search, unwilling to alarm the guests. But Poirot, however, saw opportunity in the chaos. He slipped away to the side door where the cloaked figure had exited, finding a muddy footprint just beyond the threshold, larger than those in the east wing, suggesting a different culprit. The gardens were silent, the fog muffling all sound, but a faint rustle drew his attention to a stone bench. Beneath it lay a scrap of black silk, torn from a cloak. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, pocketing the clue. The night was yielding its secrets, one fragment at a time. Back in the ballroom, the mood had soured, the guests whispering about curses and thieves. Charles, visibly agitated, argued with a local squire, his voice carrying a defensive edge. Poirot approached, catching the tail end of Charles's words. "Nothing to do with it." The squire stormed off, and Poirot seized the moment. "Monsieur Charles, a word, this necklace. Do you know of anyone desperate enough to steal it?" Charles flushed, his mask askew. "I'm no thief, Poirot. You're barking up the wrong tree." His denial was vehement, but his hands shook. As the ball wound down, Poirot gathered the family in a private parlor, the masks now removed but their guarded expressions intact. He revealed the black silk scrap and the crimson feather, watching their reactions. Lady Eleanor's lips tightened at the feather, while Miss Duval's gaze remained steady. Beatrice fidgeted, and Charles avoided eye contact. Lord Reginald, weary, pleaded for answers. "The scepter, now this necklace. Poirot, what does it mean?" "It means, monsieur," Poirot said, his voice calm but firm, "that the thief is bold, perhaps among us tonight. The scepter's theft was planned, but this necklace, it is a distraction, or perhaps a taunt." He paused, his eyes sweeping the room. "Tomorrow I will search the gardens and question the guests. The truth, it hides behind the masks." As the family dispersed, Poirot stood by the ballroom's dying fire, the crimson feather in his hand. The masquerade had revealed more than stolen jewels. It had exposed cracks in the Ashbourne facade. The cloaked figure, the whispers, the thefts, all were threads in a larger tapestry. He smiled faintly, his moustache twitching. The Shadowed Scepter's curse was a distraction, but Hercule Poirot saw through the shadows, and he would not rest until the mystery was solved. Chapter 5. Secrets in the Library. The fog that had cloaked Ashbourne Manor for days showed no sign of lifting, its grey tendrils curling against the library's tall windows like ghostly fingers. Hercule Poirot, seated at a heavy oak table, surrounded by towering shelves of leather-bound tomes, felt the weight of the manor's secrets pressing in. The events of the midnight masquerade, the stolen necklace, the cloaked figure, the crimson feather, had deepened the mystery of the Shadowed Scepter. Today he resolved to delve into the manor's intellectual heart, seeking answers in its dusty records. The library, with its scent of aged paper and wax, was a sanctuary of knowledge, and Poirot knew that knowledge was the key to unraveling deception. He had risen early, skipping breakfast to avoid the family's strained pleasantries. The library was silent, save for the faint creak of the floorboards and the distant ticking of a grandfather clock. Poirot's fingers traced the spines of books, his eyes scanning for anything related to the scepter's history. Lord Reginald had mentioned a family archive, and Poirot was determined to find it. His grey cells buzzed, connecting the clues, the footprints in the east wing, the torn note mentioning a shadow's keeper, the carved symbol, and now the necklace theft, a bold act under the guise of the ball. A leather-bound journal, tucked high on a shelf, caught his attention. Its cover bore the Ashbourne crest, faded but unmistakable. Poirot carefully retrieved it, dust billowing as he opened its brittle pages. The journal belonged to Sir Edmund Ashbourne, the ancestor who first acquired the Shadowed Scepter. The entries, written in a precise hand, detailed its origins, a gift from a shadowy order known as the Keepers of the Veil, who believed the scepter channeled unseen forces. "Its gem," Sir Edmund wrote, "glows with a light not of this world, but its power demands sacrifice." The final entry was cryptic. "The keeper must be chosen, or the shadow will consume all." Poirot's mustache twitched. The shadow's keeper from the torn note. Was it a title, a role, or a warning? His reading was interrupted by raised voices, echoing from the hallway. Slipping the journal into his coat, Poirot moved to the door, peering out to see Charles and Beatrice in a heated argument. "You're a fool, Charles," Beatrice hissed, her voice trembling. "You think no one knows, but I saw you with her." Charles's face reddened, his fists clenched. "Keep your voice down, Bea. You don't understand what's at stake." They froze as Poirot stepped forward, his presence silencing them. "Mademoiselle, Monsieur," Poirot said calmly, "your dispute, it interests me. What is this you speak of?" Beatrice flushed, her eyes darting away while Charles muttered, "It's nothing, Poirot. Family nonsense." But Poirot's keen gaze caught the guilt in Charles' posture, the fear in Beatrice's eyes. "In a house of secrets," he said, "nothing is nothing. Speak, or I shall deduce for myself." Beatrice hesitated, then whispered, "It's about Clara, Miss Duval. I saw Charles with her in the gardens, late at night before the ball." Charles glared at his sister. "You're spying now. It was just a talk, nothing more." Poirot's mind raced. An affair between Charles and the governess could explain much: motive for theft, secrecy, even the crimson feather near the stolen necklace. "Mercy," he said. "This talk, it will continue later." Returning to the library, Poirot resumed his search, now alert to the family's hidden alliances. He found a second document, a ledger detailing the scepter's maintenance over centuries. One entry, dated a year prior, noted a visit from a historian, Dr. Mortimer Klein, who studied the scepter before his sudden departure. The name struck a chord. Klein had been mentioned in passing by Mr. Grayson as a friend of the late curator Hargrove. Was Klein connected to the Keepers of the Veil? Poirot made a mental note to investigate further. The library's quiet was shattered again, this time by Lady Eleanor's entrance. Her silver gown from the ball was replaced by a severe black dress, her face a mask of controlled displeasure. "Monsieur Poirot, must you rummage through our private records?" she asked, her tone icy. Poirot smiled thinly. "Madam, the past hides the truth. The scepter's history, it speaks of a secret order. Do you know of this Keepers of the Veil?" Her eyes flickered, but she shook her head. "Old myths, nothing more. My husband's obsession with the scepter's curse clouds his judgment." Yet her fingers twisted her wedding ring. A tell, Poirot noted. He pressed further, mentioning the journal, but she deflected, claiming ignorance. As she left, Poirot caught a glimpse of her reflection in a window, her composure cracked, revealing a fleeting panic. Alone again, Poirot examined the ledger's final page, where a faint pencil mark circled Klein's name, alongside a date the night before the scepter's theft. The coincidence was too stark. Had Klein returned, or was someone using his name? Poirot's thoughts were interrupted by a soft creak. A bookshelf shifted slightly, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a single page, torn from another journal, with a sketch of the scepter and a note. "The keeper must guard, or the shadow will rise." The discovery electrified him. The scepter's theft was not merely about wealth, but tied to this mysterious order. Was the thief a keeper, or someone defying them? Poirot pocketed the page, his mind weaving connections. Charles's liaison with Miss Duval, the historian's visit, the symbol in the East Wing. The library had yielded secrets, but they only deepened the puzzle. As evening fell, Poirot joined the family for a tense dinner, the air thick with unspoken accusations. He watched Miss Duval closely, her crimson dress a reminder of the feather. She met his gaze with a faint smile, as if daring him to probe deeper. Charles avoided his sister's eyes, while Beatrice seemed on the verge of tears. Lord Reginald, weary, spoke little, and Lady Eleanor's silence was a wall. After dinner, Poirot returned to the library, the journal and torn page burning in his pocket. The fog outside pressed closer, and a faint whisper, real or imagined, seemed to echo through the shelves. "The keeper," it murmured, a challenge to Poirot's intellect. He stood, resolute, his eyes gleaming in the lamplight. The Shadowed Scepter was a key, and the library had unlocked its first secrets. Tomorrow he would confront Charles and Miss Duval, and the truth would draw nearer. Chapter 6. The Gardener Stett's Tale. The fog that enveloped Ashbourne Manor had thickened by midday, casting the estate in a spectral gloom that mirrored the growing tension within its walls. Hercule Poirot, his mind sharp despite the oppressive atmosphere, turned his attention to the manor's grounds, where whispers of the Shadowed Scepter's theft seemed to linger in the air. The library's revelations, the journal, the torn page, the keepers of the veil had deepened the mystery, but the footprints in the east wing and the cloaked figure at the masquerade pointed to a more tangible culprit. Today, Poirot sought out the manor's reclusive gardener, a man whose quiet presence might conceal vital clues. The gardens, once a marvel of manicured hedges and vibrant blooms, were now overgrown, their paths choked with weeds. Poirot, accompanied by Captain Hastings, navigated the gravel walkways, his polished shoes gathering mud. Hastings, ever cheerful, remarked on the eerie beauty of the fog-draped roses, but Poirot's focus was fixed on the greenhouse ahead, where the gardener, Mr. Amos Finch, was said to spend his days. "This Finch," Poirot said, "he sees much but speaks little. The eyes of a gardener, they miss nothing." The greenhouse was a glass sanctuary, its panes fogged with condensation. Inside, the air was humid, thick with the scent of earth and decay. Amos Finch, a wiry man with weathered hands and a face like cracked leather, was pruning a thorny shrub. His eyes, sharp beneath a battered cap, flicked up as Poirot entered. "Monsieur Finch," Poirot began, his tone polite but firm, "I am Hercule Poirot, investigating the theft of the Shadowed Scepter. You were near the manor the night it vanished. None?" Finch's hands stilled, the pruning shears glinting in the dim light. "I keep to my work, sir," he said gruffly. "Don't meddle in the family's affairs." His voice was steady, but Poirot noted the slight tremor in his grip. "Yet the gardens, they are part of the manor," Poirot pressed. "You saw something that night, perhaps near the vault." Finch's jaw tightened, and he turned back to his shrub, but Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. Before Finch could respond, a low rumble of thunder rolled across the sky, and rain began to patter against the greenhouse roof. The sudden storm trapped them inside, the air growing heavier. Hastings shifted uncomfortably, but Poirot seized the moment. "Monsieur, the rain, it keeps us here. Speak, and let us unravel this mystery together." Finch hesitated, then sighed, his shoulders sagging as if unburdening a weight. "I saw a shadow," he said at last, his voice low. "That night, near the vault's entrance by the old oak, it moved quick, like it knew the grounds. Not one of the family too stealthy." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "This shadow, it wore a cloak, perhaps." Finch nodded reluctantly. Couldn't see a face, but it carried something, wrapped in cloth. Could have been the scepter. His words were halting, as if each one cost him effort. Poirot leaned forward. "And why, Monsieur Finch, did you not report this?" The gardener's eyes darted to the door, as if expecting an eavesdropper. "There's talk of a curse, sir. I've worked here 30 years, seen strange things. Lights in the east wing, voices where no one should be. I didn't want trouble." His voice dropped to a whisper, "And someone paid me to keep quiet. A note left in the greenhouse with £10. Poirot's mustache twitched. "This note, you have it?" Finch fumbled in his pocket, producing a crumpled scrap of paper. The message, scrawled in black ink, read, "Silence is golden. Speak of the shadow and the curse finds you." The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the paper matched the torn fragment Poirot had found in the east wing. "Mon Dieu," he murmured. "The shadow's keeper moves among us." The rain intensified, drumming against the glass, and Finch's unease grew. "There's more," he said, his voice barely audible. "I heard a name that night whispered by the shadow. Klein, Sounded like they were talking to someone. Poirot's mind raced. Dr. Mortimer Klein, the historian mentioned in the library's ledger, had studied the scepter a year ago. Was he the cloaked figure, or was his name a diversion? As the storm raged, Poirot pressed Finch further, but the gardener clammed up, muttering about his duties. Hastings, restless, peered through the misty panes. "Poirot, this place gives me the creeps. Do you think Finch is telling the truth?" Poirot nodded slowly. "He speaks part of the truth, mon ami, but fear holds back the rest. The £10, the note. It is a bribe, but also a threat." The rain eased, and Poirot stepped outside, the air cool and damp. He examined the grounds near the vault's entrance, finding faint impressions in the mud, too faint to match Finch's boots, but consistent with the cloaked figure's larger prints from the masquerade. The oak tree Finch mentioned loomed nearby, its gnarled branches casting eerie shadows. Beneath it, half buried in the earth, Poirot spotted a glint, a tiny glass vial, empty but smelling faintly of almonds. "Curieux," he said, pocketing it. The scent suggested cyanide, a detail that chilled even his composed mind. Returning to the manor, Poirot found the family in the drawing-room, their faces drawn. Lord Reginald, informed of Finch's tale, looked shaken. "Carline?" He was a scholar, not a thief. Lady Eleanor scoffed, but her eyes betrayed worry. Charles, unusually quiet, avoided Poirot's gaze, while Beatrice clutched a handkerchief, murmuring about curses. Miss Duval, poised as ever, offered a faint smile. "The gardener is old, Monsieur Poirot. Perhaps he imagined it." Her tone was smooth, but Poirot sensed calculation. He revealed the vial, watching their reactions. "This was found near the oak. A scent of almonds dangerous, none." The family's silence was telling, each face a mask of secrets. Poirot excused himself, his mind weaving connections. Finch's shadow, the name Klein, the vial, the note. The scepter's theft was no simple crime, but a web of motives, and the gardener's tale had spun a new thread. As night fell, the fog thickened, and Poirot stood by his window, the vial in his hand. The storm had passed, but a deeper tempest brewed within the manor. The shadowed scepter was a beacon, drawing out betrayal and fear. Tomorrow he would confront the family about Klein and the vial, and the truth would inch closer. For now he listened to the silence, waiting for the next whisper to guide him. Chapter 7. The Locked Room Riddle. The fog that clung to Ashbourne Manor seemed to tighten its grip as Hercule Poirot descended the grand staircase, his polished shoes echoing in the morning stillness. The gardener's tale, whispers of a shadow, the name Klein, the almond-scented vial, had sharpened his focus, but the shadowed scepter's theft remained a puzzle with missing pieces. The manor's secrets were piling up like dust in its forgotten corners, and Poirot's grey cells churned, piecing together the footprints, the torn notes, and the crimson feather from the masquerade. Today he planned to revisit the East Wing, but fate, as it often did, had other plans. A piercing cry shattered the quiet, echoing from the upper floors. Poirot, with Captain Hastings at his heels, hurried toward the sound, his heart steady despite the urgency. The cry led them to a narrow corridor in the guest wing, where a heavy oak door stood ajar. Inside, sprawled on a faded Persian rug, was Mr. Grayson, the butler, unconscious, his face pale as death. A maid, Nellie, the same who had been attacked days prior, stood trembling nearby, her hands clasped over her mouth. "I found him like this, sir," she stammered. "The door was locked, I swear." Poirot knelt beside Grayson, checking his pulse. Faint but present. The room, a small study rarely used, was a time capsule of dust and neglect. A single window bolted shut, let in slivers of grey light. The door's lock, heavy and iron, showed no signs of tampering, yet a key lay on the floor beside Grayson's hand. Poirot's eyes narrowed, catching a faint whiff of almonds, the same scent as the vial found in the gardens. "Mon Dieu," he murmured. "A locked room, a fallen man, and the scent of danger. This is a riddle worthy of Hercule Poirot." Hastings, ever practical, checked the window. "No way in or out, Poirot." The bolts rusted solid. Poirot nodded. his gaze sweeping the room. A desk held scattered papers, a candlestick, and an inkwell, but nothing seemed disturbed. Then his sharp eyes caught a glint behind a bookcase, a hidden panel, slightly ajar. He pressed it, revealing a narrow compartment, empty save for a single thread of black silk, matching the scrap from the masquerade's cloaked figure. "Curio," he said, pocketing the thread. "The manor, it is full of secrets." Nellie, still shaken, explained she'd come to deliver linens when she heard a thud from the locked room. Using a master key, she'd opened the door to find Grayson. Poirot questioned her closely, noting her fear seemed genuine, though her eyes darted nervously. "Did you smell anything, mademoiselle? A scent, perhaps?" She nodded hesitantly. "Like bitter almonds, sir." It was faint. Poirot's mustache twitched. The almond scent, linked to cyanide, suggested poison, yet Grayson lived, a puzzle within a puzzle. The family was summoned to the drawing room, their faces a mix of shock and suspicion. Lord Reginald, visibly shaken, demanded answers. "Grayson has served us loyally for years. Is this the curse again?" Lady Eleanor, her composure fraying, snapped. "Enough of this curse nonsense, Reginald." Charles paced, muttering about bad luck, while Beatrice clutched her hands, her eyes wide with fear. Miss Duval, the governess, stood apart, her crimson shawl a stark contrast to her calm demeanor. "A terrible accident, perhaps," she offered, but Poirot's gaze lingered on her, sensing calculation. He revealed the almond scent and the locked room's mystery, watching their reactions. "This is no accident," he said. "Monsieur Grayson was attacked, perhaps to silence him. The scent of almonds, it links to the vial found in the gardens. Someone in this manner plays a dangerous game." Charles flushed, protesting his innocence, while Beatrice whispered, "It's the scepter's curse." Lady Eleanor's lips tightened, and Miss Duval's eyes flickered with something unreadable. Poirot excused himself to examine the study further. Hastings in tow, the room yielded more clues. A faint burn mark on the rug, as if from a dropped candle, and a smudge of ink on Grayson's cuff. The papers on the desk were mundane, household accounts, but one bore a faint sketch of the carved symbol from the east wing, a circle bisected by a crooked line. "Hastings," Poirot said. "This symbol, it follows us. It is no coincidence." He suspected Grayson had stumbled onto something, perhaps related to the scepter or the Shadow's keeper. As they searched, Grayson stirred, tended by the housekeeper. His voice was weak, his memory foggy. "Was checking the room," he croaked. "Something hit me from behind." He recalled no almond scent, only a sudden darkness. Poirot pressed gently, but Grayson's confusion seemed genuine. "Rest, monsieur," Poirot said. "The truth, it will not hide forever." Back in the drawing room, Poirot confronted the family about the symbol. "This mark, it appears again. Who among you knows its meaning?" Silence greeted him, though Lady Eleanor's fingers twitched, and Charles avoided his gaze. Miss Duval offered a faint smile. "Perhaps an old family crest, monsieur." Poirot's eyes narrowed. Her deflection was too smooth, too practiced. As evening fell, the fog pressed closer, and Poirot retreated to his room, the black silk thread and sketched symbol in his pocket. The locked room was a classic riddle, but the almond scent and hidden panel suggested a deeper plot. Was Grayson a victim or a conspirator? The scepter's theft, the necklace, the gardener's tale, and now this attack, all were threads in a tapestry of deceit. Poirot sat by the fire, his mind a whirl of connections. The manor's shadows were closing in, but Hercule Poirot would shine a light on them, one clue at a time. Tomorrow he would revisit the east wing and question Miss Duval about her crimson shawl, so like the feather from the ball. For now he listened to the manor's silence, broken only by a faint whisper, real or imagined, that seemed to echo the word keeper. The Shadowed Scepter was a catalyst, and Poirot was determined to unravel its curse before another fell to its shadow. Chapter 8. Shadows of Betrayal. The fog that smothered Ashbourne Manor seemed to pulse with secrets as Hercule Poirot stood by his window, the morning light barely piercing the grey veil. The locked room riddle, Mr. Grayson's attack, the almond scent, the hidden panel, had tightened the web of intrigue surrounding the Shadowed Scepter's theft. The clues were mounting: footprints in the east wing, the torn note mentioning a Shadow's keeper, the carved symbol, the crimson feather, and now the black silk thread. Poirot's grey cells churned, sensing a conspiracy that reached beyond the manor's walls. Today he would probe deeper, seeking the traitor who wove these threads of deceit. The drawing-room was a battleground of tense glances when Poirot entered, the family gathered like actors awaiting their cues. Lord Reginald's face was drawn, his faith in his household shaken by Grayson's attack. Lady Eleanor sat rigid, her eyes cold but wary. Charles, nursing a glass of brandy, despite the early hour, avoided Poirot's gaze, while Beatrice twisted a handkerchief, her fear palpable. Miss Clara Duval, the governess, stood by the fireplace, her crimson shawl a bold statement in the muted room. Captain Hastings, ever loyal, hovered near Poirot, ready to note every detail. "Monsieur, madame," Poirot began, his voice steady. "The events in this manor, the scepter's theft, the necklace, the attack on Grayson, point to a betrayal within these walls. Someone here collaborates with an outsider, perhaps this Shadow's keeper mentioned in a note I found." He held up the torn fragment from the east wing, watching their reactions. Lord Reginald paled, Lady Eleanor's lips tightened, and Charles's glass trembled. Beatrice gasped softly, while Miss Duval's eyes flickered with a hint of defiance. Poirot's gaze settled on Charles. "Monsieur Charles, your late-night meeting with Mademoiselle Duval in the gardens, as your sister observed, suggests a secret. Care to explain?" The room froze. Charles' face flushed, his bravado crumbling. "It was nothing, Poirot. A private matter." Beatrice's eyes widened, betraying hurt, while Miss Duval stepped forward, her voice calm but sharp. "Monsieur Poirot, you mistake friendship for conspiracy. Charles and I spoke of personal concerns, nothing more." But Poirot was unrelenting. "And yet, mademoiselle, a crimson feather like your shawl was found where Lady Eleanor's necklace vanished. A coincidence, perhaps?" Miss Duval's smile was icy. "Many wore crimson at the ball." "You accuse without proof," Lady Eleanor interjected, her voice cutting. "Enough, Poirot. My necklace is a distraction. Focus on the scepter." Her defensiveness, Poirot noted, was a shield for something deeper. The confrontation escalated when Poirot revealed the black silk thread from the locked room. "This matches the cloak of a figure seen at the masquerade, one who spoke of the keeper. Who among you knows this figure?" Silence answered, but Charles's eyes darted to Miss Duval, a fleeting glance that Poirot caught. The governess's composure held, but her fingers twitched, betraying unease. Lord Reginald broke the tension. "Poirot, I've received a letter," he said, producing a folded note. "It arrived this morning, slipped under the door." The message, written in the same scrawl as Finch's bribe, read, "The scepter is beyond your reach. Cease your search, or the shadows deepen." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "This is no idle threat, monsieur. It confirms an outsider's involvement and an insider's betrayal." Determined to test the family's loyalties, Poirot proposed a plan. "Tonight, we stage a trap. I will announce I've found the scepter, hidden in the east wing. The guilty will act, and Hercule Poirot will be watching." The family protested, but Poirot's authority silenced them. He dismissed them, instructing Hastings to spread the rumor among the servants, ensuring the bait reached all ears. As evening fell, Poirot retreated to the library, the journal of Sir Edmund Ashbourne in hand. The reference to the Keepers of the Veil gnawed at him. Was the Shadow's keeper a member of this order, or a pretender exploiting its legend? He cross-referenced the ledger's mention of Dr. Mortimer Klein, the historian, whose name had surfaced again in Finch's tale. A search of the library's records revealed a letter from Klein, dated a year prior, requesting access to the scepter for historical study. The letter's tone was formal, but a postscript added, "The veil must be preserved." Poirot's pulse quickened. Klein was no mere scholar. The trap was set as night descended. The fog thicker than ever. Poirot and Hastings positioned themselves in the east wing, hidden behind a tattered curtain. The manor was silent, save for the distant creak of floorboards. At midnight, a shadow moved, a figure in a hooded cloak, gliding toward the oak door Poirot had found days earlier. The figure paused, unaware of Poirot's presence, and fumbled with a key. Before they could unlock the door, Poirot stepped forward, lantern raised. "Halt, monsieur, or madame. The game. It is over." The figure froze, then fled, but Hastings tackled them in the corridor. The hood fell, revealing not Charles or Miss Duval, but Nellie, the maid. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with fear. "I didn't mean harm, sir," she cried. "I was told to check the door, to leave a note." Poirot's voice was stern. "By whom, mademoiselle?" Nellie sobbed, naming a stranger, a man who'd approached her in the village, offering money to act as a courier. "He called himself Klein," she whispered. Poirot's mind raced. Nellie's confession confirmed an outsider's role, but her fear suggested coercion. The note she carried, crumpled in her hand, read, "The keeper watches. Stay silent." The handwriting matched the earlier threats. Poirot released Nellie, warning her to speak to no one. "The shadows deepen," he told Hastings, but Hercule Poirot sees through them. As they returned to the main house, the fog seemed to pulse with menace. The family, summoned again, reacted with shock to Nellie's involvement. Charles' relief was palpable, Miss Duval's expression unreadable. Poirot withheld Klein's name, for now sensing the traitor was closer than ever. The Shadowed Scepter's theft was a chess game, and the next move would be decisive. Tomorrow he would confront the family with Nellie's tale, and the truth would edge closer to the light. Chapter 9. The cipher in the portrait. The fog that cloaked Ashbourne Manor seemed to thicken with every revelation, its grey tendrils curling around Hercule Poirot's resolve as he stood in the grand gallery. The betrayal uncovered in Nellie's confession, the shadowy figure, the name Cullen, the cryptic note, had sharpened his focus on the Shadowed Scepter's mystery. The manor's secrets were unraveling, thread by thread, but the web of deceit was vast, woven with clues like the footprints, the crimson feather, the almond-scented vial, and the carved symbol. Today Poirot's grey cells led him back to the gallery, where the portrait of Sir Edmund Ashbourne, clutching the sceptre, held a promise of answers. The gallery was a cavern of shadows, its portraits staring down with silent judgment. Poirot, accompanied by Captain Hastings, stood before Sir Edmund's painting, its dark oils capturing the sceptre's eerie glow. The events of the previous night, Nellie's role as a coerced courier, the note about the keeper, suggested an outside force manipulating the manor's chaos. Poirot's eyes traced the portrait's details, lingering on the scepter's gem, a crimson orb that seemed to pulse.
"Hastings," he said.
"This painting, it is more than art. It hides something, non?" Hastings squinted, puzzled. "It's just a gloomy old portrait, Poirot." But Poirot's fingers brushed the frame, detecting a slight irregularity, a seam cleverly disguised. With a gentle press, a panel clicked open, revealing a folded parchment tucked within. Poirot unfolded it carefully, his pulse quickening. It was a cipher, a grid of letters interspersed with numbers, and at its center the same crooked line symbol from the east wing. Below it, in faded ink, was a single word: chapel. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured. A cipher, hidden for centuries, pointing to a place. The chapel. It must be the ruined one on the estate's edge. Hastings' eyes widened. "The old chapel. It's a wreck, Poirot. Nothing but stones and ivy." But Poirot's mind was alight. The cipher, the symbol, the scepter, they were linked, and the chapel was the next step. Determined to investigate, Poirot and Hastings set out after breakfast, the family's tense silence lingering in the dining room. Lord Reginald had grown gaunt, his belief in the scepter's curse unshaken. Lady Eleanor's icy demeanor cracked with irritation, while Charles' bravado masked guilt. Beatrice, pale and withdrawn, avoided Poirot's gaze, and Miss Duval's cryptic smile hinted at secrets untold. The cipher's discovery was kept from them, for Poirot suspected the traitor was close. The ruined chapel, a mile from the manor, was a skeletal relic, its spire crumbling and its walls choked with vines. The fog hung low, muffling their steps as they approached. Poirot's lantern cast eerie shadows, illuminating a stone altar cracked by time. The cipher's grid burned in his memory, its letters forming a pattern, "Seek the shadow's heart." He scanned the altar, noticing a faint etching, the crooked line symbol, worn but unmistakable. "Hastings," he said, "this chapel, it is no ruin, it is a vault of secrets." As they searched, Poirot's fingers found a loose stone beneath the altar. With effort, they pried it free, revealing a hollow containing a tattered map. The map, drawn in faded ink, marked a path from the chapel to a hidden grove nearby, labeled the Keeper's Rest. Poirot's eyes gleamed. The scepter, it may not be far. This map, it is a guide. But before he could study it further, a rustle in the undergrowth snapped his attention. A shadow moved, swift, cloaked, and silent. "Stop!" Hastings shouted, giving chase, but Poirot grabbed his arm. "Non, mon ami. They expect pursuit. We observe." The figure vanished into the fog, but Poirot's keen eyes caught a glint on the ground, a silver locket dropped in haste. He opened it, revealing a tiny portrait of a man with sharp features, labeled M.K. Mortimer Culline, the historian. "The Shadow's keeper," Poirot whispered. "Culline is no ghost. He is here." The ambush unsettled Hastings, but Poirot's resolve hardened. They returned to the chapel, the map and locket in hand. The map's details were sparse, but a faint sketch of the scepter marked the grove. Poirot suspected the chapel was a meeting place for the Keepers of the Veil, the secret order tied to the scepter's legend. Was Culline their agent, or a rogue exploiting their legacy? The locket suggested a personal stake, perhaps a connection to the manor. Back at the manor, Poirot kept the discoveries secret, wary of the traitor within. At dinner, the family's tension was palpable. Charles drank heavily, his eyes darting to Miss Duval, whose crimson shawl seemed a deliberate taunt. Beatrice whispered about hearing whispers again, while Lady Eleanor dismissed the chapel as a pile of stones. Lord Reginald, however, reacted to the mention of the chapel, his face paling. "It's been abandoned since my grandfather's time," he said. "No one goes there." Poirot noted his unease, suspecting he knew more. As night fell, Poirot studied the cipher in his room, its letters resolving into a phrase, "The shadow's heart lies beneath the grove." The map pointed to a location, but the ambush warned of danger. The locket with Culline's image was a new piece in the puzzle, linking the historian to the cloaked figure. Poirot's mind wove connections. Nellie's confession, Grayson's attack, the crimson feather, the almond scent. The scepter's theft was a chess game, and the chapel was a critical move. He stood by the window, the fog a mirror to his thoughts. Tomorrow he would venture to the hidden grove, map in hand, and confront the shadow's heart. The manor's secrets were converging, and Hercule Poirot would not rest until the truth was laid bare. The scepter, the cipher, the keeper, they were all part of a larger design, and he was closing in. Chapter 10. The Stranger at the Gate. The fog that shrouded Ashbourne Manor seemed to pulse with menace as Hercule Poirot stood in his room, the cipher's map and Culline's locket in hand. The chapel's revelations, the hidden map, the Keeper's Rest, the ambush had tightened the web of the Shadowed Scepter's mystery. The clues were mounting: footprints, the crimson feather, the almond-scented vial, the carved symbol, and now the locket linking Dr. Mortimer Culline to the cloaked figure. Poirot's grey cells buzzed, sensing the conspiracy's threads converging. Today a new player would enter the game, and Poirot was ready to meet them. The morning was disrupted by a commotion at the manor's gates. Captain Hastings, ever alert, burst into Poirot's room, his face flushed. "Poirot, there's a stranger at the gate. Says he has information about the scepter." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Mon ami, this is no coincidence. Let us see this stranger." They hurried to the entrance hall where the family had gathered, their faces a mix of curiosity and suspicion. Lord Reginald stood by the door, his expression wary, while Lady Eleanor's icy gaze betrayed unease. Charles paced, muttering, and Beatrice clutched her hands, pale as ever. Miss Duval, her crimson shawl draped elegantly, watched with a faint smile. The stranger was a tall man, lean and weathered, with sharp eyes and a neatly trimmed beard. He wore a travel-worn coat and carried a leather satchel, his demeanor calm but purposeful. "I am Dr. Elias Vaughan," he said, his voice low and precise. "I've come about the Shadowed Scepter. I know of its theft and its danger." Poirot studied him, noting the man's steady hands and the faint scar across his brow. "Monsieur Vaughan," Poirot said, "your arrival is timely. Speak, and let Hercule Poirot judge your words." Vaughan claimed to be a historian, a colleague of Dr. Mortimer Klein, who had studied the scepter a year prior. Cullen spoke of the Keepers of the Veil. Vaughan said, a secret order tied to the scepter's power. He believed it was stolen, not for wealth, but to control its influence. "I came to warn you. Klein is near, and he's dangerous." The family reacted sharply. Lord Reginald paled, Lady Eleanor scoffed, and Charles's eyes darted to Miss Duval. Beatrice whispered, "The curse." Poirot's moustache twitched. Vaughan's story was compelling, but his timing was too perfect. Before Poirot could probe further, a crash echoed from the courtyard. A window in the gatehouse had shattered, and a servant reported a cloaked figure fleeing into the fog. "A break-in attempt," Poirot murmured, his mind racing. He led the group to the gatehouse, where glass littered the ground and a crowbar lay abandoned. Footprints, large, like those from the masquerade, trailed into the mist. "The shadow moves again," Poirot said, his eyes on Vaughan. "Monsieur, you arrive, and chaos follows. Explain." Vaughan's composure held, but his fingers tightened on his satchel. "I came alone," he insisted. "Klein must have followed me. He knows I'm here to expose him." Poirot's gaze lingered, sensing half-truths. He questioned Vaughan about Klein's motives, learning that Klein had been obsessed with the scepter, claiming it held a key to the veil. Vaughan produced a letter from Klein, dated weeks before the theft, hinting at a plan to reclaim the shadow's heart. The handwriting matched the threatening notes Poirot had found. The family, shaken by the break-in, retreated to the drawing-room, where Poirot interrogated Vaughan further. "This veil, monsieur. What is it?" Vaughan hesitated, then spoke of an ancient order that guarded relics like the scepter, believing they channeled unseen forces. "Klein betrayed them," he said. "He wants the scepter for himself to wield its power." Poirot noted the locket in his pocket, bearing Klein's image. "And you, Monsieur Vaughan, are you a keeper?" Vaughan's eyes flickered. "I was once, no longer." Poirot's suspicions deepened. Vaughan's story aligned with the journal and cipher, but his arrival coincided too neatly with the break-in. Was he an ally or a pawn in Klein's game? Poirot revealed the locket, watching Vaughan's reaction. "This was found in the chapel, monsieur. It bears Klein's face." Vaughan's composure cracked, his voice sharp. "He was there. Then he's closer than I thought." The family's reactions were telling. Charles flinched, Miss Duval's smile faded, and Beatrice gasped. Determined to test Vaughan's claims, Poirot organized a search of the grounds, suspecting the cloaked figure had left clues. Near the gatehouse he found a scrap of paper, torn and muddy, with a single word, Grove. It matched the map's reference to the Keeper's Rest. Poirot's pulse quickened. The scepter was near, and Colleen or his agent was circling. He kept the find from Vaughan, wary of his motives. At dinner the manor's tension was palpable. Vaughan joined them, his presence a spark in the powder keg of the family's fears. Charles drank heavily, his eyes on Miss Duval, whose cryptic glances suggested a hidden agenda. Lady Eleanor dismissed Vaughan as a charlatan, while Lord Reginald pressed him for details about Klein. Beatrice, silent, seemed on the verge of collapse. Poirot watched, his mind weaving connections. Vaughan's arrival, the break-in, the grove, the locket. The scepter's theft was a battle for control, and the stranger at the gate was a new piece on the board. As night fell, Poirot stood by the fire, the locket and scrap of paper in hand. The fog outside pulsed with secrets, and the manor's shadows seemed to whisper keeper. Tomorrow he would venture to the grove, map in hand, and confront Klein's shadow. The game was escalating, and Hercule Poirot would not falter until the truth was revealed. Chapter 11. The Vanishing Witness. The fog that enveloped Ashbourne Manor seemed to tighten its grip, as if conspiring to hide the truth from Hercule Poirot's relentless pursuit. The stranger at the gate, Dr. Elias Vaughan, had stirred the hornet's nest, his claims about Dr. Mortimer Klein and the keepers of the Vale, adding a new layer to the mystery of the Shadowed Scepter. The clues, footprints, the crimson feather, the almond-scented vial, the carved symbol, Klein's locket, and the chapel's map pointed to a conspiracy that wove through the manor's very stones. But the sudden disappearance of a key witness would test Poirot's intellect like never before. Morning broke with a frantic knock at Poirot's door. Captain Hastings, his face pale, burst in. "Poirot, it's Nellie the maid. She's gone." Poirot's eyes narrowed, his grey cells already racing. Nellie, the coerced courier who had named Klin in the East Wing trap, was a vital link. Her vanishing was no coincidence. "Mon ami," Poirot said, adjusting his tie, "this is a bold move by our shadow. We must act swiftly." The manor buzzed with agitation as Poirot gathered the family in the drawing-room. Lord Reginald, haggard from sleepless nights, clutched a crumpled note found in Nellie's room. Lady Eleanor's composure was fraying, her fingers twisting her shawl. Charles, hungover and sullen, avoided eye contact, while Beatrice's hands trembled, her fear palpable. Miss Duval, ever enigmatic in her crimson attire, watched with a faint smile. Dr. Vaughan, the newcomer, stood apart, his sharp eyes scanning the room. Poirot took the note from Lord Reginald, reading aloud its scrawled message. "The keeper calls. I must go." The handwriting matched the threatening notes, linking Nellie's disappearance to the scepter's thief. "This note," Poirot said, his voice calm but piercing, "suggests Mademoiselle Nellie was taken or fled under duress. She named Klein, and now she is gone. Who among you knows more?" The family's silence was heavy, broken only by Beatrice's whisper, "The curse, it's claiming her." Lady Eleanor scoffed, but her eyes betrayed worry. Charles muttered about servant nonsense, while Miss Duval's gaze flickered, as if weighing her words. Vaughan, however, spoke up. "Klein is ruthless. If Nellie betrayed him, she's in danger." Poirot's moustache twitched. Vaughan's certainty was too convenient. Determined to find Nellie, Poirot organized a search of the manor and grounds, enlisting Hastings and the servants. He began in Nellie's quarters, a sparse room in the servants' wing. The bed was unmade, a shawl discarded on the floor, and a faint scent of almonds lingered, chillingly familiar. A search of her belongings revealed a hidden scrap of paper, tucked beneath a floorboard, bearing the crooked line symbol and a single word, "Passage." Poirot's pulse quickened. Mon Dieu, the manor hides more than we know. Recalling the manor's map, Poirot suspected a hidden passage, perhaps linked to the East Wing's oak door. He led Hastings to the basement, where the vault's corridor branched toward the neglected wing. The air was damp, the walls cold to the touch. Near the oak door, Poirot's lantern revealed a stone slab, slightly askew. With effort, they shifted it, uncovering a narrow tunnel descending into darkness. "Hastings," Poirot said, "this passage, it is the manor's secret heart. Nellie may be within." The tunnel was claustrophobic, its walls slick with moss. Cobwebs brushed their faces as they descended, the air growing colder. At the tunnel's end, a small chamber opened, its walls etched with the crooked line symbol. A pile of rags in the corner stirred. Nellie, bound and gagged, her eyes wide with terror. Poirot freed her, his voice soothing. "Mademoiselle, you are safe. Tell Poirot who did this." Nellie's voice trembled. "A man cloaked," he said. "Klein would punish me. He brought me here last night after the trap." She described being grabbed in her room, blindfolded, and dragged to the passage. The man had spoken of the scepter, demanding to know what she told Poirot. "He wore a ring," she whispered, "with that symbol." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A ring, you say? This is significant, mademoiselle." The symbol linked the attacker to the keepers of the Vale, and the passage suggested a hidden network within the manor. Nellie's rescue confirmed Klein's active presence, but her fear of retribution hinted at a larger conspiracy. Poirot helped her to her feet, escorting her back to the main house where the family awaited, their reactions a mix of relief and suspicion. In the drawing room, Poirot revealed Nellie's ordeal, watching closely. Lord Reginald's concern seemed genuine, but Lady Eleanor's sharp glance at Charles suggested doubt. Charles protested his innocence, while Miss Duval's calm demeanor felt rehearsed. Vaughan's eyes narrowed at the mention of the ring, but he remained silent. "The passage," Poirot said, "is a clue to the scepter's hiding place. Tomorrow we go to the grove as the map directs. The Keeper's Rest holds the key." As night fell, the fog pressed closer, and Poirot sat by the fire, the symbol-etched ring vivid in his mind. Nellie's rescue had saved a witness, but raised new questions. The passage, the ring, Klein's shadow, all pointed to a final confrontation. The Shadowed Scepter was near, and Poirot was ready to face the Keeper's wrath. Chapter 12. The Shadowed Truth. The fog that had gripped Ashbourne Manor for days seemed to retreat slightly, as if sensing the climax of Hercule Poirot's investigation. The rescue of Nellie from the hidden passage had electrified the household, confirming the presence of a dangerous conspirator tied to Dr. Mortimer Klein and the mysterious keepers of the Veil. The clues, footprints, the crimson feather, the almond-scented vial, the carved symbol, Klein's locket, the chapel's map, and the ring described by Nellie had woven a complex web. Now Poirot stood in the grand hall, ready to unravel the mystery of the Shadowed Scepter before the assembled family and their enigmatic guest, Dr. Elias Vaughan. The hall was a cavern of flickering candlelight, its high ceilings amplifying every sound. Lord Reginald stood at the head, his face etched with exhaustion. Lady Eleanor, her composure brittle, gripped the arm of her chair. Charles slouched, his eyes bloodshot from drink, while Beatrice sat pale and trembling, clutching a handkerchief. Miss Clara Duval, her crimson shawl, a stark contrast to the sombre mood, watched with an unreadable expression. Vaughan, the stranger, stood near the door, his sharp eyes scanning the room. Captain Hastings, ever loyal, flanked Poirot, ready to note every reaction. The air was thick with anticipation, the weight of secrets pressing down. "Monsieur, Madame," Poirot began, his voice clear and commanding. "The theft of the Shadowed Scepter has brought fear and betrayal to this manor, but Hercule Poirot has seen through the shadows. Tonight, the truth will be revealed." He paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back, his moustache twitching with purpose. The scepter was not stolen for greed, nor by an outsider alone. It was hidden within these walls, by one among you to protect it from a greater threat. Gasps rippled through the room. Lord Reginald's eyes widened while Lady Eleanor's lips tightened. Charles scoffed, but his hands shook. Poirot continued, holding up the torn note from the East Wing. "This speaks of a Shadow's Keeper, a title tied to the Keepers of the Veil, an order guarding the scepter's power. The footprints, the cipher, the map, all point to a plan to conceal, not steal, the relic." He turned to Nellie, standing nervously at the edge. "Mademoiselle Nellie named Dr. Mortimer Klein, a man obsessed with the scepter's power. But Klein is not the mastermind. He is the threat." Poirot's gaze swept the room. The scepter was hidden by Lord Reginald himself. The hall erupted in shock. Reginald staggered, his face ashen. "Poirot's, how dare you?" Lady Eleanor cried. But Poirot raised a hand. "Monsieur, you knew Klein sought the scepter. You moved it to the hidden passage, discovered by Nellie to keep it from him. The whispers, the flickering lights, these were distractions, staged to fuel the curse's myth and deter Klein's pursuit." Reginald's shoulders sagged, his voice hoarse. "It's true. Klein contacted me months ago, demanding the scepter. He spoke of the veil, of power I didn't understand. I hid it to protect my family." Poirot nodded. "But you trusted the wrong confidant. Someone betrayed you, feeding Klein information." His eyes settled on Miss Duval, whose smile vanished. "Mademoiselle Duval, your crimson feather marked the necklace theft, a distraction to keep suspicion from the scepter. You are Klein's ally." Duval's composure cracked. Her voice sharp. "You have no proof, Poirot." But Poirot produced the locket, its portrait of Klein gleaming. "This, found in the chapel, ties you to him. Your meetings with Charles were not romantic. They were to pass messages to Klein." Charles flinched, his guilt exposed. "I didn't know," he stammered. She said it was about debts. Poirot's gaze softened but remained firm. "You were a pawn, Monsieur Charles, but a willing one." Beatrice sobbed, her fear spilling over. "I knew Clara was hiding something." The whispers, "I heard her voice." Lady Eleanor's face hardened, her silence damning. Vaughan stepped forward, his voice urgent. "Poirot, Klein is close. He tried the break-in, sent the notes. He'll come for the scepter." Poirot nodded. "And we shall be ready. The scepter is in the passage where Lord Reginald hid it. Tonight we trap Klein." Poirot outlined his plan. The family would guard the passage's entrance, while he and Hastings waited inside. The rumor of the scepter's recovery had already spread, baiting Klein. As night fell, the fog thickened, and the manor grew silent. In the passage, Poirot's lantern cast eerie shadows, the crooked line symbol etched on the walls. A faint noise, a footstep echoed, and a cloaked figure appeared, clutching a knife. Poirot said, stepping forward. The figure froze, then lunged, but Hastings tackled him. The hood fell, revealing not Klein, but a hired thug, his ring bearing the veil's symbol. The thug confessed under Poirot's questioning. Klein had hired him to retrieve the scepter, using Duval as a spy. Duval, cornered, admitted her role, her defiance crumbling. "Blind promised power," she whispered. "The scepter's gem, it's no myth." Poirot shook his head. "Power is a shadow, mademoiselle. You chased an illusion." The scepter was recovered from the passage, its crimson gem glowing faintly. Klein remained at large, but the manor's traitor was unmasked. The family, shaken, faced their fractured trust. Poirot stood in the hall, his work nearly done. The shadowed truth had emerged, but the scepter's curse lingered, a warning of secrets yet to unfold. Chapter 13. The Scepter Seb's Legacy. The fog that had shrouded Ashbourne Manor for weeks began to lift, as if the resolution of the Shadowed Scepter's mystery had loosened its grip on the estate. Hercule Poirot stood in the grand hall, the recovered scepter resting on a velvet cushion, its crimson gem catching the morning light with an eerie glow. The unmasking of Miss Clara Duval, as Klein's ally, the capture of the hired thug. And Lord Reginald's confession had unraveled the conspiracy, but the manor's wounds remained raw. Mortimer Klein, the elusive mastermind, was still at large, and the scepter's curse lingered in the air like a whispered threat. Today Poirot would tie the final threads of the case, leaving the Ashbourne family to face their future. The hall was quieter now, the family gathered in a sombre tableau. Lord Reginald, his face etched with relief and regret, stood beside the scepter, its return a bitter-sweet victory. Lady Eleanor, her icy facade softened by exhaustion, sat with uncharacteristic stillness. Charles, sobered by his unwitting role in Duval's schemes, stared at the floor, while Beatrice, her fear replaced by a fragile resolve, clutched her father's hand. Captain Hastings, ever loyal, stood by Poirot, his notebook filled with the case's twists. Dr. Elias Vaughan, the historian who had warned of Klein, lingered at the edge, his expression guarded but satisfied. "Monsieur, Madame," Poirot began, his voice steady. "The Shadowed Scepter is restored, but its legacy is not so easily resolved. The keepers of the veil, Dr. Carline, Mademoiselle Duval, they sought its power, real or imagined. Yet the true curse is not in the scepter, but in the secrets this family has kept." His eyes swept the room, noting each reaction. "Lord Reginald, your decision to hide the scepter was noble, but secrecy bred betrayal. The truth, it must now guide you." Reginald nodded, his voice hoarse. "I hid it to protect us, Poirot. Klein's threats, he spoke of the veil's power, of destinies altered. I feared for my family." Poirot's moustache twitched. "And yet, monsieur, you trusted Mademoiselle Duval, who used your son's weaknesses against you." Charles flinched, his voice low. "I was a fool, Poirot. She played me, talked of paying my debts, but it was all for Klein." Beatrice spoke up, her voice stronger now. "I heard her whispers, Poirot. I thought it was the curse, but it was her plotting in the shadows." Lady Eleanor, her eyes glistening, added, "I suspected her, but I said nothing. I thought it was Charles' folly, not this." Poirot nodded, his gaze softening. "The heart, it blinds us, madam, but the mind, it sees clearly." Vaughan stepped forward, his satchel clutched tightly. "Carline is still out there, Poirot. The keepers won't stop. The scepter's gem. They believe it holds secrets beyond wealth." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Monsieur Vaughan, your warning was timely, but your role in the Vale remains unclear. Speak plainly. Are you still one of them?" Vaughan hesitated, then shook his head. "I left the Order years ago when I saw its corruption. Carline twisted their ideals for his own gain." Poirot accepted this, but his suspicions lingered. The scepter was returned, but its allure would draw others. He turned to the family. "The scepter must be guarded, not hidden. Its myth fuels greed. Dispel it with openness. Place it in a museum. Let its history be studied, not coveted." Reginald nodded slowly. "You're right, Poirot. No more secrets. We'll donate it to the British Museum, curse and all." As the family dispersed to prepare for the scepter's transfer, Poirot walked the grounds with Hastings, the air crisp with the promise of clearer days. The chapel, the grove, the hidden passage, all had played their part, but the manor itself was the true stage. "Hastings," Poirot said, "this case, it reminds us that power, real or imagined, corrupts. The scepter is but a symbol, yet it tore this family apart." Hastings nodded, his voice thoughtful. "Do you think Klein will come back, Poirot?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "If he does, mon ami, he will find the scepter beyond his reach. The truth, it is a light even the darkest shadow cannot escape." They paused by the oak tree where Poirot had found the almond-scented vial, its menace now a memory. The manor's wounds would heal, but its scars would remain. That afternoon, Poirot prepared to depart, his suitcase packed with his usual precision. The family gathered to bid him farewell, their gratitude tinged with sorrow. Beatrice, her courage new-found, pressed a small flower into his hand, a gesture of thanks. Charles, humbled, offered a handshake, while Lady Eleanor's nod held a grudging respect. Lord Reginald, his voice steady, said, "Poirot, you've saved more than the scepter. You've saved us." Poirot bowed slightly. "The order of the mind, monsieur. It restores what chaos destroys." As the car carried Poirot and Hastings away, the manor's silhouette faded into the thinning fog. The scepter's legacy was one of caution, a reminder that secrets breed shadows. Poirot leaned back, his mind already turning to new puzzles. The shadowed scepter was safe, but Klein's shadow lingered, a challenge for another day. For now, Hercule Poirot had brought light to Ashbourne Manor, and that was enough.